The James Bond franchise has been the reigning champion of the spy genre since its first outing, but now it would be bold to say that it's no longer the gold standard for spy movies. Many have started to question whether the crown was slipping when the Jason Bourne movies came on the scene and started doing things the Bond movies didn't. So, what ways are the Bourne movies better than Bond? Let's find out in this video. So, without any further delay, let's get into the video. What makes the Bourne movies better than Bond? As much as I love James Bond, I think the Bourne movies have outshone the first-run franchise in different ways over the years. In the world of action, chase sequences and twisty turns, innovative storylines, and unexpected structure, the Bourne films set the bar for the genre. Here are some ways I think Bourne has outshone Bond and will continue to do so until further notice. Let's start with the fact that despite not being a spy, Jason Bourne is without doubt a better spy than Bond. James Bond is silky smooth, a ladies' man, and a crack shot, but he's never necessarily been known for one of the most important things of a spy, keeping a low profile. The hide in plain sight thing has worked for Bond so far, so I can't justify going dark on every mission, but one of these days a villain will drop him and he'll regret giving the full name of him to anyone who asks days before. Additionally, he has a history of putting his own desires and feelings ahead of his obligations to M, such as the need for vengeance after the passing of a lover or fellow agent. Unlike Bond, who goes to meet the enemy, Bourne is in permanent dodge. He does not seek to distinguish himself, but to blend in with the crowd. For Jason Bourne, keeping a low profile and gathering information was his means of survival. If he wasn't constantly on the move or seeking influence against the CIA, he would be dead. The plot calls for Bourne to be one step ahead of the CIA, even though he's basically a highly skilled brainwashed assassin. As such, they've made it so that Bourne has to be a spy on the level such that he is to stay one step ahead of one of the largest intelligence organizations in the world. He has been trained to wield a variety of weapons, and his instinctive combat abilities are deadly. As a master of infiltration, escape, and obfuscation, he gets in, gets out, and hides effectively. Bourne is untraceable while trying to remain undetected. He has a strong sense of right and wrong because he was once a soldier and a spy. Jason Bourne is the secret agent of the poor, of the street. Instead of the aesthetics of luxury and gadgets, there is that of recovery and recycling. It is the refutation in action of the idea of a military armada. Bourne is able to take a paper newspaper and make a weapon out of it, and Matt Damon is an anti-singularity actor. Talking about continuity, I will tell you that the Bourne movies have better continuity than the Bond movies. The Bond franchise has been around for decades, and while that's a true testament to its success, it also puts it at a huge disadvantage in this category. The Bond movies have very little to no continuity, and even when the movies try to make connections, the layman may need a roadmap to navigate the ins and outs of the story and make sense of it. There are fewer Bourne movies, yes, but it's not hard to tell what order they appear in or how they all factor into the bigger picture. The Jason Bourne story is a big arc set over 4 movies, and then there's the branch of Jeremy Renner's The Bourne Legacy that's still tied into the story but not necessarily Bourne's. You don't have to make sense of it, it already makes sense, and I can really appreciate that when I try to work out Bond's connections. The next obvious reason that makes the Bourne movies better than the Bond movies is the fact that the Bourne franchise has more expandability and new stories. The James Bond franchise has lived for decades in Hollywood, and yet we have yet to see a spin-off of this franchise. Of course, there have been rumors of something happening after the upcoming No Time to Die, but until then, this adventure has been about the James Bond story. It's a bit strange considering that MI6 has more than one field agent, and there have to be more stories to tell or create from this rich universe. The Bourne movies have already had 2 spin-offs, one being The Bourne Legacy, and the second being the short-lived Treadstone. While the movie still doesn't have a follow-up and the show apparently won't get another season, they both proved that this franchise can continue without Jason Bourne if he has the right idea. I'll personally add that Treadstone was an exciting show that didn't get the attention it deserved, and I think it had the right idea on how to expand the world of Bourne greatly. Next up, one could argue that Daniel Craig's Bond is heavily inspired by Jason Bourne. Why so? Although there were those who had doubts about a blonde Bond, there's no denying that Daniel Craig's rough and tumble take on James Bond reinvigorated the franchise. There's also no denying that his movies have been somewhat inspired by the success of the Bourne movies, and it's easier to watch Jason Bourne in James Bond as Craig than to watch Bond sometimes. Sure, Craig's Bond has the style and is arguably classier in some ways than the previous Bonds. He is also a master of hand-to-hand combat and fearless in a way past incarnations were not. not. Jason Bourne is obviously the standard for undercover operatives with the excellent hand-to-hand combat skills, and many of Bourne's moves are seen in the bathroom scene in Casino Royale. This could just be a sign that James Bond has finally caught up with the times, though I and others, such as you, are more convinced that it's more of the Bond franchise finally seeing a legitimate contender and being compared to someone else in the genre spies. What's your thought on that? Let me know in the comment section. After Jason Bourne, everyone did Jason Bourne. It is partly because of him that the producers of 007 chose an actor as physical as Daniel Craig to relaunch the saga. Casino Royale was inspired by the Bond style. We see a Bond without gadgets, much more hot-headed, much more tortured. The pace quickened. In general, we have never seen the heroes run so much. If you look at the posters, they are still going, when we had never seen Roger Moore run. We can argue about the real modernization or not of James Bond. By Craig's own admission, 007 remains a reactionary misogynist. But the fact is that Jason Bourne, who returns to dark rooms 9 years after The Vengeance in the Skin, today no longer has anything of an outsider. His legacy has been so well integrated and digested by contemporary cinema that he could even be considered a respected ancestor and a little outdated. Then there's only one Jason Bourne. James Bond has had the luxury of staying relevant for many decades, but with that legacy comes the need for change. Sean Connery is a fantastic actor with an undeniable legacy, but there are some things at the age of 89 that he couldn't do playing Bond today. To keep Bond looking smooth, suave, and fit for action, modifications are needed, which isn't the world's worst crime. Characters are recast all the time, but there's something to be said for when only one actor plays a part. Matt Damon is Jason Bourne, and it looks like he will be the only actor to play Bourne. Perhaps that will change if the franchise lasts as long as Bond, but for now, there's something commendable about how this franchise is willing to try and expand without needing Jason Bourne. If that changes somewhere along the way, I think something will be lost, although it can ultimately be gained given that the franchise hasn't necessarily found another major face to lead the franchise. Until that day though, I'll take my hat off to Bourne for giving his star only one face. To wrap it together, Bourne is not like Bond. Bond is an assassin who works for and from within the system. He is a man stuck in the 1960s, a misogynistic spy, an insatiable woman-eater, and with an imperialist, if not fascist, veneer. A man who sleeps with all those who come within range and kills whoever gets in front of him, if with that what fulfills his service to the state, without his conscience becoming resentful. And the public wants him to do it and then go to the other part of the world, wearing his white tuxedo and drinking dry martinis. Nobody wants to see James Bond cry. Jason Bourne, on the other hand, is against the system. Most likely, Bond was one of those chasing Bourne. So that concludes today's video. If you found the video helpful, give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to share the video with your friends and family. Also, let me know in the comments section what your favorite Bourne movie is. Thanks for watching. See you next time.